So Samuel and Marjorie Cushkin saw the attack from the window. Mr. Cushkin wanted to call the police, but Mrs. Cushkin said, I didn't let him because there must have been 30 calls that day. And as we know, there was actually no calls. So before I kind of move on to the next kind of slide that kind of helps break down this bystander effect, there was actually a number of factors that influence helping. So I kind of want to gauge what you think influences this contextual or the situational force right now before I kind of go into what they came up with. Okay. Yeah.
What about, like, I guess, how much you know about the subject?
Perfect. Yes. And you touched on assuming responsibility as well. Okay. So the first one is obviously noticing the emergency. And I'll go into each factor afterwards. But the second one is interpret as an emergency. The third one is assuming responsibility. The fourth one is knowing what to do, what you touched on there. And the last one is deciding to help. So this first factor I thought was kind of neat because they actually did a study. And it's called the Good Samaritan Study. I don't know how many of you are actually familiar with this. But the subjects with this one were seminary students. And they were asked, some of them, to tell about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And the parable of the Good Samaritan goes, for those of you who don't know, is that this guy is walking along a path and then he gets beat up. And then he gets left and robbed and left on the side. The first person pops by, kind of walking along, kind of just sidesteps him and goes on his way. The second guy also sees him lying on the road, walks away as well. Finally, the third guy comes along. He doesn't even belong to the country, and he actually helps this person out. So what they did was they manipulated the hurry scenario. That's what they call it, hurry manipulation here. So the seminary students were either told, there'll be a few minutes before they're ready for you to give the talk, but you might as well head on over now. Or in the medium condition, the assistant is ready for you, so please go right over. And the third one was the high hurry manipulation, where they were expecting you a few minutes ago. The assistant should be waiting for you and you better hurry over. And what happened was that when they were going along the way, they also passed a narrow corridor. And they actually saw this gentleman, something like this, kind of lying down on the floor. Now I guess you can kind of assume what happens. When it was in the low hurry manipulation, more people were likely to help. In contrast, when it was high, they just walked right by. So they were less likely to notice because they were so narrow-minded and focused on their own thing. The second one is interpret as emergency. And this has to do with pluralistic deterrence. Again, if you are likely to see other people's reactions and they are able to see something as an emergency, you're likely to assume that's not an emergency as well. And you're interpreting it as not an emergency, as a result you don't help. Third one is assume responsibility, and again, this has to do with diffusion responsibility. Again, if you don't take initiative, no one is going to help out in that situation. Knowing what to do, expertise matters. So this point harkens to, like, say I saw someone drown. That's why I put this lifeguard example. I don't know how many of you are lifeguards out here. Yeah, there's a couple of you. But what happens is that if I see someone drowning, most likely I won't know what to do. But if Sharissa sees someone drowning, most likely she's actually going to run out there and try and help the individual because she actually knows what to do in that circumstance. So expertise in a certain field matters. So I don't know if you know cars or something really well. You see someone trapped in the car, you might know how to actually break into the car a bit differently than someone like me who actually knows nothing about cars. And the last thing is assignment to help. The unfortunate thing is that we're all social beings, and we kind of had this fear of embarrassment. I remember, I think, when was it? Yeah, I was just walking along, and this lady just dropped her glove. And I kind of just was like, oh, maybe she didn't notice or something. And she was just kind of walking along, and I saw someone else walking around. And then I noticed that no one else kind of picked it up. And I was like, oh, maybe she just kind of embarrassed about the whole thing for not picking up this loose glove or something. So I didn't want to pick it up for her, and I didn't end up helping her. Luckily, she kind of realized it and turned around. So many of us are kind of weighing the cost to us as humans and what this does to our social status. And then basically, if we're likely to see a danger in the situation, we're less likely to help. So afterwards, I kind of wanted to conclude with this kind of summary of the thing. And just as an activity, I wanted you to tie in a factor with the time you didn't help someone. So from my own perspective, like I listed the sock scenario, but the most prominent one is assuming responsibility. Is that when I was in grade 11, it was kind of funny. Well, luckily because no one was hurt. But what happened was I was up around like 1, and then a burning cart kind of rolled down in front of my house, and I kind of noticed this thing on fire outside. And then I kind of woke my dad up. I'm like, Dad, there's like something on fire outside right now. And he's like, I'm like, should I call the police or something? And then he said, oh, don't worry, someone's gonna call the police. And then blah, blah, blah. So I ended up watching this thing on fire for like, I think 15, 20 minutes or something. And then finally, like someone actually driving by around 1:30 ended up calling. And then I saw, it was a fast thing. The fire truck came and they popped out and they just kind of closed it down and they kind of popped back up. But because I didn't assume responsibility for the situation, and I went to my dad who told me not to do anything about it, I kind of just left it up, and then luckily it didn't blow up anything. But normally at this point I would get an exit slip from the students just so that they kind of intervene, and they just kind of a factor that they tied in with what they didn't notice. But yeah. So if I have any kind of closing remarks here, I'm kind of hoping that with this kind of knowledge base, when you actually do, if circumstances call for it, then you do end up calling 911 or something like that, or reacting to the emergency, because most likely the people around you won't do anything about it, and you might end up actually saving a life. So, yeah.
Isn't this similar to the phenomenon that goes on in high school in particular with bullying and sexual harassment?
Yep.
That last one, like weighing your options, or if it's in a moment of embarrassment,
Yep.
you see this thing going
You're
on.
less likely to kind of come in and interfere and help out in the situation. Exactly. So this kind of, I'm hoping that with this knowledge we can apply it. Yep.
Is there any like data to show if women and men react differently?
There actually is. This is actually from a whole lecture on pro-social behavior, and the next component of it is individual differences and also cultural differences. So if you're in a collective kind of society, you're more likely to be attuned to others instead of yourself. But the thing is, with an individualistic society, we're more attuned to ourselves.
It's kind of interesting with mob mentality where it's completely biased, where people that really won't do anything bad get in a mob and then they basically lose their self and they become an entity with themselves, but it seems like they don't have any responsibility. They're like, well, because everybody else is doing it, they probably won't not.
Yeah, well, it's the anonymity factor, right? And that actually does have to do with defining behavior as well. And it has to do with group and then gangs and all that. But yeah, that'll be another topic as well.
Just touching on Russ's point, I haven't seen it yet, but apparently there's a documentary, British documentary about like doctors, lawyers, accountants who become part-time soccer hooligans on weekends. And it's actually like, it's really disturbing. Like they go out and they get in like fights with bats and chains, and like beat people into submission, and like return home to their like Porsches, Ferraris, housewives, kids, and like they lead that lifestyle, but they vent. They have a psychological problem where they have to go out in a mob and be bad every weekend and fight, beat up other people who cheer for an opposing soccer team.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you ever decide to be adventurous and play Christian sport, wear a cup and a helmet. I mean, if you ever go watch Christian sports leagues, it seems to be a localized thing. I played in a bunch of them. It is the most violent sport you'll ever play in your life.
No matter what sport it is.
It's like, it doesn't matter what sport it is, it's more violent than women's field hockey. It's just crazy. It's just a total event.
Well, if they want to, yeah, they can kind of fill it out.
It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I kind of would have liked to have blended it.
Go with that. We're going to take a break.
Sure.
But while you're thinking, Alex, if you want to pass that out to them, just tell them what you want them to do, see how they look like.
Well, basically, I just need you to take a sheet of paper out and basically write down an instance where you didn't help someone and kind of tie it in with one of the factors that I listed here on noticing, interpreting. So basically, like the personal anecdote I've had. Yeah.
What if you help every time?
If you help every time, that's more serious. Yeah. But most likely there are times, yeah, like Russ says.
Those times you help and it gets you in a lot more trouble.
Yeah.
I did that. I pulled over one time to help somebody, and like I ended up like helping them jump the battery wrong before I knew how to jump batteries.
Yeah, you get stung with them.
Good luck, Alex.
I have an experience to share. I once got caught in a burning building and managed to get to an open window. And there's a whole crowd behind me, so I got to push myself through this window. This guy grabs me by the leg. He wants to go first. And I'm trying to get through, and he's yanking my leg, and I'm kicking at him, and he's yanking my leg, just like I'm down your leg now. Let's go have a coffee. Back here at 1:45.
All done.